What is up, guys? Welcome back to That's Right, I Said It. It is Monday morning, fresh off of a weekend. Um, feel pretty good considering. I'm always a little like on Mondays. I don't know why. It's just something about being off and being able to kind of do your own thing for a couple of days. Starting back Mondays, where you actually have to um, be present, mentally and physically at a workplace, and you're no longer able to do everything that you want to do, but you're kind of, I hate to put it this way, it makes it sound bad, but you're being forced to do other things that are not quite as enjoyable. But anyway, just really quick, pretty good weekend for me. I did stay away from the Kratom bar. Some of you might be wondering about that. So I am glad about that, because the last couple of weeks in a row, since I've been doing this tapering process, and a little over the last month since I've quit the MIT 45 extracts, I kind of got in this little habit where I was doing really well during the week, cutting down my powder dosage, every day. And again, last week was down to roughly about 6.5. I think it was 6.5 grams that I actually took. No, I'm sorry, 7 grams that I took, I think, on Thursday. And then Friday, I actually only took about 6.5 grams that day of Kratom. So that's good. I've cut down, 6.5 grams of Kratom in one day is not much. So that's a pretty significant decrease in the amount of Kratom that I've been taking. But again, I got in this habit of, um, making some good progress during the week, and then on the weekends, which is kind of my time to, this is gonna be a bad way to put it, but to let my hair down, even though I have very little of it, to kind of let loose a little bit is kind of what I do on the weekends. And so I was doing really well during the week, only to go and go to like the Kratom bar and have to uptake my Kratom use on the weekend. And I was not cool with that, because I was finding that it was setting me back in my attempt to kind of reset my tolerance, because I'm trying to reset my tolerance, bring my tolerance level down, stuff like that. I was successful this weekend, did not go to the Kratom bar, got up Saturday morning and completely skipped my morning dosage of Kratom. I admit I was somewhat irritable, probably by about 12:30, 1 o'clock, because we get up in the morning and we start busting it. And we were having company Saturday night as well. So we were working in the lawn, cleaning the house, doing laundry. Once we do that, we get showered. My wife cut my hair for me. We get showered up and then head out to do like any grocery shopping or anything like that, which is what we usually do on Saturday. So by the time 12:30, 1 o'clock rolled around, I was a good probably 16 hours since I had my last dosage of Kratom. So I was starting to get a little bit irritable. I admit it. I was starting to feel it a little bit, like, okay, I'm ready to, take a little something, because like I said, I'm tapering. I'm not doing a cold turkey. And although I've cut my dosage down by a lot, the whole point of tapering is so that you don't dramatically feel those effects of withdrawal that much. And I was starting to feel it some, especially with my mood and energy and stuff like that, as of about 12:30, 1 o'clock on Saturday. So when we went out to go shopping, I dropped by my local head shop, and I was going to get me a few. A lot of the places don't sell these, but this place actually has some Kratom gummies, which they're not really strong. It's one of those things where somebody like me, I'd have to probably eat 2 or 3 of them to get a decent effect from them. But it was my first dose of Kratom for the day, so I was like, yeah, we're going out. Can't do the MIT, so let me stop and get myself a couple of Kratom gummies. I'll pop a couple of those, and then that'll kind of help take the edge off of any withdrawals, give me a little mood lift, and then we can just continue the rest of the day. And I just want to say that be careful, because a lot of the folks that work in these head shops are literally, and the head shops themselves are literally like legal drug pushers. Because this particular place that I stopped at, this is the place that I used to get all of my MITs. And for probably a good year or so that I was on the MITs, those guys were seeing me regularly. I was in there, some weeks I was in there every day, picking up 1, 2 MITs, just whatever. So those guys got used to seeing me. It was one of those where as soon as they saw my face walk in the door, they immediately started walking to the, to the locked shelf where they keep all of the MITs and stuff, because they knew that's what I was coming to get. Well, I hadn't been to see them in over a month, because I haven't been taking the MITs, but old habits die hard. As soon as I walked in, is one of the guys that I'd seen a million times before, and I walked in and he looked kind of almost like surprised to see me, and he came around from back around the corner and was walking towards the shelf where the MITs were, and I kind of stopped him. I was like, yeah, no, I'm good on those, man. And I actually explained to him, I had to come off the MITs. I was starting to go through some withdrawals when not taking them and stuff like that, and they're just too expensive, so I just came off of them. And of course he was like, I hear that. And I asked him if he had any of the gummies. So he gave me, I got like 10 of, the Kratom gummies or whatever. And the guy goes in and, these places like this, they get these new samples of things that they want people to try. And, he pulled this thing out, was like, have you tried these? And he handed it to me, and I looked at it, and it was clearly an extract. It was clearly a Kratom extract. It was not an MIT. It was not one like any that I'd ever seen before. It was obviously some sort of new product, or sample or something like that. And he handed it to me. I was like, nah, I've never, never seen one of those. But, I'm not trying to get the extracts, the liquid. And he was like, okay. And I think the guy was high on something. A lot of those people are, to be honest with you. I don't know about the head shops in your town, but the one in my town, there are times where I walk in, I'm like, dude, I know you work in a head shop, but jeez, guy seems like he just went, straight blunt to the head by himself out back before coming in and ringing me up. But anyway, neither here nor there. Hand it back to him, and I don't know if it's just because he was high or he's trying to get me hooked back on the extracts, but he just kind of nodded his head like that, and he set it on the other side of the counter. Not on his side of the counter, but on my side of the counter, where you set the merchandise after someone's paid for it or whatever. And he set it down, and he was ringing up the gummies or whatever, and I was like, why did he set this extract on my side of the counter? Because I didn't ask him, I wasn't purchasing it. And I was like, what, are you giving me this? And he was like, yeah, why not? It's a sample. And of course I took it. I haven't had an extract in 5 weeks now. And it was free, man. So, of course I took it. And I went out to the car, and I pulled it out of my pocket, and my wife was in the car, and I was like, this dude gave me this. She was like, really? I was like, yeah. And she, she didn't think much about it, because she knows I don't take the MITs anymore, and I'm not gonna. At this point, I'm off of them. I've come off of them. I'm not going back. And it's one of those things where I can tell you for sure that resetting your tolerance and decreasing the amount that you're taking on a regular basis really does help you to begin to feel the effects of the Kratom as you did when you first tried it. Because what happens is you try this stuff, and the very first time you try it, first couple of times, you're like, whoa, this feels great. Well, as your tolerance increases and as you take it more and more and more, you begin to find that the same amount doesn't affect you as intensely. And that's one of the positive things about, tapering and then beginning to decrease your tolerance, because you can then reset your tolerance level back to the point where now when I take just a little bit, I can really start to feel it. So needless to say, haven't had an extract in about 5 months. So of course I, shook it up and I took about half of this extract, and it wasn't that big. It's smaller than the MIT. And I've also found that most of these extracts are significantly less potent than the MITs. And I'm pretty sure this one was the same. But I shook it up, took about half of it. And by the time we parked in the grocery store parking lot, I was like, whoa, Euphoria City. I'm talking about, I felt like I had just popped an OxyContin and a Percocet back to back. I mean, I was high as shit, man. And what that did remind me of is that, wow, when I was taking those MITs and when I was hooked on those MITs and taking them regularly, several times a day, sipping on it several times a day, every day of the week, I really, truly had built up a tolerance to those things. And they were not affecting me that much. It got to a point where I was, taking a little bit of them just to feel normal. And that experience, taking half of that extract and then feeling as high as I did, I mean, I was, and plus too, I had not taken any Kratom. That was my first dose of Kratom for that day. And it's, at this point, it was probably going on 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I got high as shit, man. So if you're a person who you found yourself taking too much of the Kratom, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you've been there. If you've been a person that you found yourself taking too much of the Kratom and it's just not really giving you the same effect as it was before. And then tell me about a time that you've, after going a little while without taking it, or, or decreasing your dosage pretty exponentially, and then you take something that really gets you high. Let me know your story about that. I'd like to hear your story about that, because that's what I experienced Saturday. That amount that I took of extract, a month and a half ago, if I would have taken that, it wouldn't have done shit. I mean, it would have just served to keep me from, going into any sort of withdrawal or whatever, but it wouldn't have made me feel high. I can guarantee you. But that little bitty dosage on Saturday made me feel high as a kite, and it really also affirmed for me that it's important to, not take that stuff on a regular basis, not take it, 3 times a day, every day, up to a certain amount, keep increasing your dosage. If you do that, you're gonna lock yourself into this state of, well, now I have to have it. Otherwise, I feel like shit, and I not only feel like shit, but the amounts that I'm taking aren't going to affect me the same way. And that really taught me that on Saturday, and really reminded me of, yeah, dude, you're doing the right thing by coming off of the Kratom extract, just taking the powder and then decreasing the powder on a regular basis. It really has begun to reset my tolerance for Kratom, and that was obvious when I took that little amount of the extract. But outside of that, that was it. That was my one little hurrah with an extract in almost the last month and a half. And of course, that didn't tip me over the edge. I didn't go back and buy any more or anything like that. So that was good. And today, I only took 1 Kratom when I woke up this morning. 1 Kratom capsule, which is less than a gram. And so at this point, I took my second dosage just a few minutes ago, and it's about 12:30. So at this point, I'm at about 3.5 grams, a little under 3.5 grams of Kratom for today. So this weekend was good. I didn't do a lot of backsliding this weekend. And then starting today on Monday, I was able to dive right back into, I'll take about 6.5 to 7 grams of Kratom today. And that's kind of where I wanted to be. That's where I ended last week on Friday. And so I wanted to make sure that as the weekend progressed, I didn't start to jack my tolerance level up again, to where when I started back the week, I had to start back at like 10, 11, 12 grams of Kratom just to function normally. And I've been able to avoid that again today. I'm picking up kind of where I left off on Friday, and hopefully I'll chop it down once or twice more today, and hopefully by the end of the week I'm hoping to be around maybe 5 grams, 4 or 5 grams of kratom per day, and that would be amazing. And that would really serve the purpose of kind of helping me wean myself off of it. All right, so I want to tell a story. And I had some company over Saturday night, and we were talking about, certain things that are, in terms of, drugs, synthesized drugs, things like that, that are legal, that have been legal and then got outlawed, became outlawed. And we were talking about this spice, and like K2, there was another kind of it. I can't remember what they called it. What did they call it? Anyway, if you're an old schooler like me, and I don't know what state you're coming out of, I'm in North Carolina, and I know in North Carolina it was probably somewhere around 2016-ish, maybe 2015-ish, 16-ish. And the spice, what they called synthetic weed that they were marketing as synthetic weed, had been in our head shops for a while. I don't know exactly how long, because I only messed with that stuff for maybe about a year or something. And I never went into head shops that much, and I just didn't know a lot about it. But of course I learned about it, and being the addict that I am, I was like, oh, let me try this, try this stuff, because obviously it wasn't detectable as THC, because it wasn't THC. So I'm like, oh, cool. You don't have to worry about getting drug tested by a job. This is something that you can do, and it kind of flies under the radar, that sort of thing, which I'm sure that's why a lot of people started using it. But I had some absolutely freaking insane experiences on this stuff. There was one time that I smoked this, and at this time I was producing a lot of music and stuff like that with my brother, and actually we were both divorced, so we were actually rooming together at that time. And I smoked so much of this stuff one time that I remember looking over at my brother and looking at him, and he literally looked like a wax figure. Like a wax figure that was alive and moving, albeit moving very slowly, because everything in my brain was just like, it was just so, the chemicals were just so like discombobulated, as that it was like I was kind of half in and half out of it. But I remember looking at him, and he looked like a wax figure. Another time that I smoked this, and here's the thing about this spice stuff. And again, leave a comment, let me know if you've experienced anything similar with this back in the day. It's illegal now. You can't find it anywhere now where I'm from, which I wouldn't want to mess with it anyway. I'll go into in subsequent videos how I ended up just never messing with it again. But so there was this, you could smoke it. It was one of those things where it wasn't very well regulated. So you may take a hit one time and not really feel much of anything. And you're sitting there going, wonder if I should take another hit. I didn't really get much off of that. And then 5 minutes later, you can turn around and take about the same size hit, and it will put you into another freaking dimension. And when I say dimension, I mean fucked up to the point where even as a drug addict, I'm like, okay, this ain't cool. Get me out of this shit. Get me out of this shit. And the thing about the spice was, it was one of those where it was like a really intense, hard ride for about a good 4 or 5 minutes. Then, inevitably, it started to kind of decrease, and you kind of started to come to again. Everything started to kind of feel normal somewhat again. Very much not like natural marijuana in that way. natural marijuana, you smoke, you probably stay high for an hour or so, starts to come down a little bit, but you're feeling the effects of it for a good hour, 2 hours. This spice stuff wasn't like that. You would feel the effects and feel them really strongly for a good 4 or 5 minutes. Then you started to come off of it. And I had one of those intently strong hits. And I remember going into my bedroom and just trying to get away from everyone, for starters. Just trying to get away from everyone. And because I felt so just out of my head. And I remember going into my bedroom and taking my shirt off. And I'm a pretty fit guy. I was at the time too. And taking my shirt off and looking at myself in the mirror and literally having an outer body experience to the point that my reflection in the mirror looked like someone else. And let me see if I can explain this. This is really hard to explain. I knew in my subconscious, in my mind's eye, it's me in the mirror. But my mind and the chemicals in my brain were just so disconnected from what we think of as rational thought and what we perceive as our reality on an ongoing basis. I was so disconnected from that I started like I was picking a fight with myself. Like, come on, motherfucker, come on. And I was like rearing up at myself like this in the mirror and actually getting like nervous. Like, whoa, this dude's pissed. I was actually having those feelings of like, I'm sure you've all been somewhere. And I mean, of course, none of us are pussies, but anytime you've been somewhere and somebody steps up to you, you feel like you're about to get in a fight. I mean, it's natural. You get a little nervous, a little anxious, like heart starts beating. I mean, even if you're the baddest ass dude on the block and on the planet, you're going to have some nerves when it comes to somebody stepping to you like that. I started feeling that, and it was me. I was intimidating myself. And I remember that experience. And I was I was coherent enough to where I knew that it was me and that I wasn't going to be hurt by this person, whatever. But my psyche was just so out in left field at that point that I remember physically being intimidated by my own image in the mirror and like posturing to myself like, come on, motherfucker, come on, stuff like that is just idiotic. I'm not that type of dude to do something like that, but there I was. And so I had that experience. with spice. And this next experience, I'm gonna tell you, this is the worst experience I ever had. So right around sometime in 2016, sometime around in there, the DEA or FDA or whoever, I'm not sure, the governing agency, comes in and actually literally rips all that stuff off the shelf. Like, I was at a gas station one week, they had it. I come back to that same gas station the next week to get some more of it, and literally the cashier told me that somebody from the government came in and told them they had to take it all down. They can't. The government agent came back 2 or 3 days later and literally collected every box, every package, everything they had in terms of the spice. So they just did a clean sweep, went state by state by state. Well, it was gone in North Carolina, and I guess they were working their way north to south. I don't know, because I was kind of hooked on it at this time because I'd been smoking a lot of it, and so we called some places. Basically, we came to learn that North Carolina had gotten rid of it, but there was still some places in South Carolina that had the spice. So we figured out what a couple of these places were, and basically we learned that they were in the same situation. Like, this was, it was a limited time, and even the people who were selling it knew that, you know, the hammer was about to drop really soon. They had already been notified that the bill had been signed to completely get rid of all this stuff and for it not to be sold. And but they weren't at that point yet where a government official had came in on their particular establishment and said, get rid of all your spice. So there was places, a lot of the places in South Carolina had already just gotten rid of it. You know, they were like, well, it's coming anyway, go ahead and get rid of it. But then there were other places that were a little more ballsy. They were like, hey, I spent money on this shit. I'm trying to recoup some of my money. So we found one of those places, and my wife, this is how hooked I was. We actually drove about an hour and 50 minutes, a couple of different times, to South Carolina to get some of this spice. Well, this one time we went and we got some, and this spice was called Scooby Snacks. And we were thinking, you know, it's probably not as strong as some of this other stuff that we've tried. You know, I used to smoke this stuff called Gravity. I mean, it will get you lit out of your gourd. And we were like, well, you know, this is probably just the leftover, like, more benign stuff that they have that the government hasn't yanked out yet. And, you know, it's probably one of those products that's kind of flown under the radar because it's not very strong or whatever. And that's what I was thinking. That was my mindset when we bought it. So we're driving back down 85 South, heading back to Greensboro. And of course I bring a bowl with me because I'm going to hit some of it. We got a long drive back. And my wife, of course, was like, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to do that? You know what kind of experiences we've had on this stuff at times. And I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to smoke much of it. So I go and I take a little hit of it. Not a big one, but a hit nonetheless. About 60 seconds later, things started to like close in to where I could only see a certain amount. My periphery was severely affected, and everything looked like a distorted animation. My world, the highway, cars, the white lines on the side of the road, the lines over here, the exits, the signs, everything started to look like this fucked up, distorted, like, animation. And I knew immediately, like, whoa, babe, I think I'm gonna need to pull over. And of course she was like, pull over. I literally, listen to me, I was, you know, probably 38, 39 years old when this happened. I literally asked my wife to grab the wheel for me. I'm sitting here at the driver's side wheel, literally asked my wife to grab the wheel for me because I was afraid I was not going to be able to get the car off the road without wrecking or hitting something. That's how fucked up I was off of one hit of this Scooby Snack stuff. So when I tell you I have survived some shit in my days of drug use, I mean that. And I also mean to, you know, with that story, I also want to illustrate that there are certain things that just absolutely should not be legal and people should not be able to freely get their hands on. Spice was one of those. I don't think Kratom falls into that category. In fact, I know Kratom doesn't fall into that category. No, it has its own dangers and risk, of course. But let me know if you guys have had any experiences with Spice and K2, and I think there's one called Salvia or something like that. Let me know if you guys have had any experiences with stuff like that back in the day. And it's interesting, man. I'm lucky to be here, guys. I'm so lucky to be here. Let me know your comments below, like the video, and please do subscribe to the channel. That helps me with my analytics to see kind of who's watching and stuff like that, what my target audience is. Definitely between 25 and 45. I've looked at that. Pretty much everybody that's watching my videos are between that age range. I'm not surprised. I would imagine most of the Kratom users are within that age range. So anyway, thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next time. Peace.